Hey guys, so in between responding to Stefan Molyneux's video about rape, I'm going to discuss rape in the broader sense, without having to listen to Stefan Molyneux, which is a plus. This is going to be one of those videos where I've got like just enough notes that I have to check them, but not quite enough notes that I can just read them, so you might have to bear with me while I'm reading them off. First of all, the idea behind Schrodinger's Rapist is it's based off Schrodinger's cat, and Schrodinger's cat is basically an idea to do with theoretical physics, and it's to do with the fact that until you see a cat in a box, you cannot determine what state that cat is in, and therefore that cat is in all states at once. And the idea with Schrodinger's Rapist is that until a man rapes you, you cannot know whether or not they will rape you. And therefore every single man is a potential rapist. That's broadly the idea. You know, if you want to sum up the idea, it is just simply every man is a potential rapist. Now I agree with this idea, and I want to discuss why this idea isn't sexist, and why this idea isn't comparable, as many people claim it is, to the idea that black people are more likely to commit crimes, or we should be afraid of black people, because black people statistically commit more crimes. So first of all, regarding the fact that it's different from black people committing large amounts of crimes, the idea that all men are potential rapists technically has nothing to do with the fact that men rape in more often than women do, or that men rape in especially high numbers. Neither of these facts need to be true for Schrodinger's Rapist to hold water as an idea. It's more to do with the fact that there is no way to discern between a man who might be a rapist and a man who can almost certainly not be regarded as a rapist. And in this sense, you know, even if it's statistically unlikely that a man is a rapist, it's still a problem because you've no real way of working out which man is a rapist and which isn't. So you can look at certain facts about somebody's upbringing and somebody's psychology and discern that they are more or less likely to commit a crime. You know, this is why you should be wary when in poor neighbourhoods, because we know that people who live in poor neighbourhoods have poor education, generally quite poor family structure, not necessarily much of a community, are likely to have lots of people who will commit crimes that you can discern from the fact that you're in that place that the people you meet are a potential threat. Now, there is nothing you can look at regarding a man to prove or even to suggest that they are more or less likely to be a rapist. A man can be nice, a man can be intelligent, a man can be well off, and broadly speaking, a man can have all of the virtues that would normally incline us to exclude the idea that they pose a threat. You know, normally you would think, oh, they're not going to kill me, they're not going to shoot me, they're not going to rob me, because they are a gentleman, if you like. Except, there are men out there who do not think that it is rape if a girl is incredibly drunk, who do not think that it is rape if a girl tells them to stop and they keep going, some who even think they are at liberty to force themselves on a woman who doesn't want to have sex, and as long as she becomes passive at some point during the altercation, it is not rape. That's the reality, and this exists independent of how well off you are or your psychological state. There is nothing, perhaps other than the fact that you may be inclined towards feminism, that would indicate that you would be immune from the way many men regard sex. Now, you might think that most men don't think like this, but there was a recent study called Denying Rape, but Enforcing Forceful Intercourse, and ultimately the result of this self-reported study was that a third of the 86 men at the college stated that, if they could get away with it, they would force a woman into sex. Shockingly, only 13.6% of men said that they'd rape a girl if they get away with it. When you consider that disconnect between something that would seem to quite obviously be rape and actual people who thought it was rape, it makes you wonder whether the other 2/3 of men had their wherewithal to actually answer the question accurately. If a third said they'd force women into having sex and only 13% said they would rape someone, then it makes you think, if only 13% define forcing someone to have sex as rape, then what about the people outside of that, the 33%, who might not, or who might also have similar misunderstandings about consent and force and things like that? However, in reality, saying that all men are potential rapists is not sexist against men, because it is based on a cultural phenomenon. And fundamentally, it is equivalent to a feminist saying women earn less than men, or women are less represented in politics, or women are less represented in STEM fields. Women are pointing out these facts where women underperform, and they are arguing that this is because of a cultural phenomenon. No one would argue that a woman saying that women earn less than men is a woman being sexist against women. And likewise, the fact that many men are potential rapists, or all men are potential rapists, and many men do not understand consent, is not sexist against men when a feminist is proposing it, because chances are the feminist is arguing, as she would with women, that the problems with gender and masculinity and all of that come from the culture. So, it can be changed. And this phenomenon is the same reason why male victims of rape aren't taken seriously. It's the idea that men, at the most base level, just want sex. It's two sides of the same coin, and in the case of male on women rape, it's this seemingly casual attitude towards the notion that men just need to meet their needs through one way or another. Then there's the other element, which is victim blaming. We put the onus completely on the woman to avoid rape happening. There has historically been no onus on men to actually prevent rape by not raping drunk women. Men are almost quite explicitly informed by society that if a woman is drunk in the presence of a male and he rapes her, or even if a man forces a woman down and rapes her, it's her fault for leading on and getting too drunk. Because everyone knows that you can't teach a rapist not to rape. This is something we hear all the time in response to this idea, that we should teach rapists not to rape. Rapists are going to rape, no matter what. Because men don't view themselves as lacking that much humanity, the only logical conclusion is that they can't be a rapist, because we paint this idea that rapists are these boogie rapists who can't be reasoned with and apparently spring out of holes in the ground rather than being the product of society. And a nice person who doesn't fit into this evil rapist archetype must be a nice person who was led on and misunderstood. And therein lies the problem. We don't want to teach boys not to rape, because we don't want to believe that they are capable of rape. But in refusing to teach them about consent, we end up ensuring that many of them will grow up to be potential rapists. The reason why the feminist approach is sexist is that it ignores this idea that all rapists are evil monsters who can't be reasoned with, and it ignores the idea that all nice young lads are sweet and innocent and could never rape. Instead, it suggests that human beings need to have certain ideas taught to them. In this case, through comprehensive sex education. But they believe that men are potential rapists because of society's flaws, and they believe that this idea of Schrodinger's rapist, that anybody, no matter how nice they are, could easily be a rapist, could be gone in only a few generations and easily reduced within one generation. If my son was part of a generation of children that were taught about consent in sex education, then that generation of children, 10 years away from now or so, could be the generation of children that is basically done with rape culture. There is no real way of telling, but I think it's at least possible that the willingness of men to commit rape could be a thing of the past in a generation's time, if we are willing to approach sexual education from the angle of admitting that decent men not understanding consent is a problem. I'll bring this analogy into racism, I'll bring this into the racism analogy that many anti-feminists make by talking about black culture versus rape culture. Firstly, rape culture is widespread and affects women in some ways just as it affects men. Women will often victim blame and let boys off just as much as men will, if not possibly more. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that women actually have more of a role in entrenching sexist attitudes than men do. So rape culture is not equivalent to black culture. Black culture is usually based on blaming black people for, and I use the term black culture, I should clarify. Black culture is a term that a lot of people use when they argue that they aren't against black people, they are against black culture. And the argument they make is that black culture is what you see in the streets of Harlem or Compton or places like that. And rape culture is different, because even though rape culture usually has its worst effects through men, rape culture isn't necessarily the result of men. If we go back to the point I made, which is that we are usually less inclined to take rape seriously because we believe that our boys could never grow up to be rapists. Stereotypically, who is more likely to be making that argument? It's more likely to be the mother. It's more likely to be the mother who's saying, oh, my boy could never grow up to be a rapist. Don't teach him about consent. It doesn't matter, I'm sure he'll get it. And like I say, there are studies that indicate that it is the actions of women that actually entrench sexist attitudes. So the idea of rape culture isn't an indictment against men entirely. Secondly, black culture is a part of black people's identities. If you're going to claim that the problem is not black people but black culture as an analogy for discussing rape culture, then you're basically implying that rape is an intrinsic part of the male identity. If you think that teaching children about consent is an attack on masculinity, then you're wrong. When people talk about black culture, they're talking about rap music, ebonics, and other things that they find to be distasteful, that they reckon will lead black people to be more violent. When feminists talk about rape culture, they're talking about 1. a poor understanding of rape throughout society, and 2. a tendency to remove responsibility for rape from the rapist to the victim. So, it is there's you see a bit in the men's rights movement an attitude of they use the term creep shaming, and they also will often claim that shunning rape is shunning male sexuality. So if you're going to criticise a form of media, say, for making male sexuality seem aggressive or domineering, then you must be criticising male sexuality. That is an argument an MRE would make, which is, I'd like to think, false, but apparently they think that men are naturally aggressive and domineering, so I don't know. let's see. So, with that in mind, why is this different from the idea that every black man is a potential thief? And first of all, I should clarify that it may not be completely different, because after all, you do hear people who advocate for more economic inequality, for more economic equality. They will say that now, if there was less crime, there would be less. For example, you do hear people who I'm probably not going to cut it, I'll probably just leave it. They say if there was less poverty, then there would be less crime. And an implication of that is that poor people are more likely to be criminals. And you hear a lot of activists for black people arguing that something should be done about the number of black people in poverty. The idea that a black person is more likely to be a criminal is an idea that can be harnessed to be used in favour of black people, as Schrodinger's rapist can be used to protect men. The argument is, as it is with men, not that black people are inherently more likely to be criminals. The argument is that there is a problem with the structure of our society when many black people have to resort to crime. The idea, I guess I should clarify what I'm trying to say here. The idea that many black people resort to crime is something not only that I think many POC activists would happily address, it is something that I think it is, they would argue it is almost imperative that they address, because black people resorting to crime is a symptom of a larger problem, and that larger problem has negative effects for black people. If black people have to resort to disproportionately to white people, if black people have to resort to stealing and murdering and drugs and blah blah blah, then maybe that's just the problem with the way our society approaches black people and the position that our society has put black people in. Likewise, if many men think that it's okay to rape women, and they think that it is normal to just have sex with someone who is completely drunk and then think, oh yeah, win, another one to the tally, then that is a problem with the way that our society views men, and, like I've said before in this video, that has negative effects for men, because it has the knock-on effect of implying that a man could not possibly be raped, because everyone knows that all men are just sex crazed. That's what you have to believe if you want to buy into the idea that rape culture commonly spreads. So not every black man is a potential thief, and this is another point I need to stress. Every black person you run into in a horrible area is a potential thief, which we can maybe grant, but robbery is much more violent crime that is much less easy to rationalise. For this reason, you can be certain that if somebody is your friend, if you get on well with somebody, if you know that they are educated and relatively well off, you can be certain that they won't rob you. I could say with absolute consequence that none of my black friends, or even black people I know peripherally, would steal from me. I would be comfortable getting drunk with them, I would be comfortable walking in a dark alley with them, I would be comfortable being completely alone with them. And the simple reason for this is that the majority of them are educated, the majority of them are quite well off, the majority of them are not exhibiting any of the actual reasons, or are not affected by many of the actual reasons why black people might be disproportionately more likely to enter into crime. And that's the trouble with sort of correlation equals causation, because black people are statistically more likely to commit crime than white people, sure, but then you've got two things to consider. Number one, black people are more likely to be impoverished than white people, and number two, white people who are impoverished are more likely to commit crime than white people who aren't impoverished. So it would suggest that the problem is not black people, but rather being impoverished and not having any option other than to enter into crime. Now, as far as I know, there are no demographics illustrating clearly what it is that makes a man more or less likely to be a rapist. Like I say, the only thing that we can reasonably say might affect it is that they could be a feminist, which is something I will get into pretty soon. I have a lot of male friends at uni, just as I have a lot of black friends. And I also have a lot of female friends. And I could not say with confidence that my female friends would be safe with some of my male friends. Despite the fact that they're nice, despite the fact that they're friendly, despite the fact that I can get along with them completely. And this appears to be the case with just for me and for our mutual friends. I could not say with confidence that many of my male friends definitely wouldn't rape a woman. Even though they're friends, even though I talk to them all the time, even though I go out drinking with them, even though I go to the pub and eat meals with them, even though I did Secret Santa with them, I'm not confident. In some cases, I know for a fact, based on what they've told me, that leaving them alone with a drunk woman who they consider to be attractive and whom they wanted to have sex with would be a bad idea. And that is the essence of rape culture. It is the idea that a nice person, someone who you'd have no reason to expect would be malicious or violent or inclined to be a criminal, would rape someone. And there's just no way of knowing that they wouldn't. So I think the best argument you could make is that feminist men are unlikely to rape, because a feminist man is going to be pretty clued up on what rape is and why it's bad and why you shouldn't do it. But even then, I was raised in the same culture that has caused thousands of decent men to rape every year. And maybe it's perhaps less likely for me, because if you've watched many videos, you might know that I don't just pay lip service to feminism. I am quite involved in it academically. But you know, a man saying that they respect women, or a man saying that they like feminism or anything like that, doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be a rapist. And I mean, I would almost say that if I wasn't me, I would say that, you know, I mean, I know that I'm not going to rape someone, but from the point of what I project, from the point of what I put out there is nothing I could possibly do to suggest that it is less than a 20–30% chance that I could actually still be an opportunist sexually and aggressive sexually, in which case I am a potential rapist, and it's just because I've been raised in a culture where no matter what, there is an opportunistic and a aggressive attitude surrounding sex. So we aren't going to be able to say that men are not all potential rapists until our ideas about male sexuality and female sexuality change dramatically. And when that changes, it will be good for so many people for so many reasons. And maybe you think Schrodinger's rapist is poor wording. Maybe you think the idea that all men are potential rapists is a bit harsh and it's not a nice way of saying the reality of the situation. But I think it highlights best why we need feminism still, because so much damage is done to both genders just because of how we view the relationship between gender and sexuality to this day, and how we still continue to present it. And it is a problem, and it's a problem that, reasonably speaking, we couldn't have expected society to address, considering that it's still under 100 years since women were granted the vote. It's not surprising that even now there are negative ideas about sexuality that do negatively affect women. So, you know, that alone would suggest that we probably still need feminism, because, like I say, if it hasn't even been 100 years since women were given the vote, what are the chances that they are completely equal culturally? But the fact that I think that it is almost undeniable that rape is based more on cultural attitudes than it is on poverty or psychopathy or anything like that. And this is one of the first things that I'll address in my response to Stefan Molyneux. Next video I make, he starts off talking about the creation of a rapist, and I think he makes many false statements in that. But until now I submit this as sort of a precursor to that, to say that yes, all men are potential rapists, and no, this idea isn't sexist, because all I want, for the sake of men everywhere, is for us to honestly assess how we view sexuality, and to actually address the fact that many men are making a very stupid decision based on very morally bankrupt ideas that society has taught them about sexuality. And I consider this to be not just not hating men, but positively good for men to actually think, let's be realistic about what we can and can't do sexually. So, thank you for watching.